Okay, so I'm on the warm-up, and we're going to do Tuesdays, which is 4 through 6. So you should already have this completed because I know everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, so number 4, you should be correcting this on your paper as I'm going over it. All right, here we go. Greg is considering opening a checking account and getting a debit card with one of 4 different banks, A, B, C, or D. He summarized his findings in this table. Greg will always have sufficient funds in his account. Okay, that just means he's never going to not have money in his account, or he's never going to go negative. He has $100 to open an account and pay for checks and a debit card. With which bank should Greg open an account? So let's look here. Okay, each bank has a minimum required balance to open. Okay, we know that Greg has $100 to open with. So the first thing we need to see is, does he meet the minimum balance for each bank? Okay, 100, and they are 50, 25, 75, and 75. So yes, he has more than that for each account. Okay, the fee to open the account is $25 for bank A, $50 for B, $10 for C, and it's free for D. So what we need to do here is figure out, okay, based on the fee to open, the cost of checks, and the cost of the debit card, which one is going to cost him the most. Okay, it says he's going to pay for checks and for a debit card. So that's why we need to look at this checks column and the debit card column, and we need to take that out of his $100. Okay, plus we need to also take out the fee to open the account, which is how much it's going to cost you just to open an account at that bank. Okay, he's always going to have sufficient funds. That's what it says right here in this first sentence. So this insufficient funds fee doesn't even matter for him. We can just kind of mark that one out. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add up the cost for each of the different banks. Okay, so looking at bank A, it's $25 to open. Checks cost $20. And a debit card costs $10. So when we add 25 and 20, that's 25, 35, 45. Plus another 10, that's $55. So bank A, it costs $55 to open. Okay, looking at B, it costs $50 to open, plus $30 for the checks. That's 50, 60, 70, 80, and the debit card is free. Looking at bank C, costs us $10 to open. It's free for checks, and $20 for a debit card, which brings us to $30. And for bank D, it costs nothing to open the account. It costs $20 for checks, and it costs $5 for a debit card, so that's $25. Okay, so there's 2 things I want you to look at. The minimum balance required means at all times he has to have that minimum balance required. So even though he would have it to open with, okay, we still need to look at, once he buys everything he has to buy, is he going to have the minimum balance that he needs in the bank? Okay, and the only one that he would still have the minimum balance when you take away each of these amounts from the 100 is going to be down here, because 100 minus 25 gives me 75. Okay, so bank D is the bank he needs to go with. All right, number 5. Number 5, Alyssa, you better behave, Missy. The label on a bottle of Juice Extreme states that this bottle contains 50% real fruit juice. How is this percent of real fruit juice written as a decimal? Okay, so if we've got 15%, okay, what we need to know is, how is this percent written as a decimal? Okay, well, lucky for you, if we go back to our handy dandy OMG, behind that first tab, we have the Dr. Pepper rule. Okay, So we're looking at converting a percent to a decimal. So when we go to our percents to decimals, to turn a percent to a decimal, we start and we move 2 places to the left. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to start and we're going to move 2 places to the left. 1, 2, decimal. So to fill this in, we're going to put decimal 1.5. You can put a 0 in front of this decimal if you would like. You do not have to. And then you can fill in the bubbles 1 and 5, and they need to be nice and neat. Okay. And that's about as difficult as that one gets. So a pretty easy one. Okay, kind of a refresher. All right, and the last one on this side, number 6. Number 6 says, a racetrack judge recorded the lap times of 5 race cars and compared them to the historical average lap time of the track. Okay, we've got race car A through E here, and it says which list the values in the table from least to greatest. Okay, so we've got least to greatest. Okay, I don't know if you remember this from the beginning of the year, but we talked about lining up those decimals. Okay, if you get confused, again, you can go back to that OMG. It's back at the beginning of the year again, whenever we learned about ordering rational numbers. Okay, we talked about making them all decimals and putting them on a line. That was the most important part, is that we said we need to line them up. Okay, fill them with zeros and give them the same last name. Unless they're repeating. If it's a repeating decimal, we fill in with the same number. And then we can go left to right looking at the order. Okay, so that's just a little reminder. We can go back over here, and we need to get all these decimals lined up. I'm going to use the line that's already here right in the middle, and I'm just going to line them up right on that line. So 0.57, 0.15, negative 1.1, 1.3, and negative 0.7. Okay, I don't see anything repeating here, so I can go through and add zeros where I need to. Okay, now the first thing I notice is that there's 2 negatives. I know that if I'm looking for least to greatest, the smallest numbers will be the negatives, right? And the negatives are opposite. So the bigger the negative number, the smaller the number actually is. Okay? The bigger the negative number, the smaller the number actually is. So I'm going to take my 2 negatives and I'm going to look and see which one is the smaller number. So when I go from left to right, when I'm comparing these two, I see negative 1 and negative 0. So I know negative 1.10 is my smallest number. So if it doesn't start with negative 1.1, guess what? I can mark it out. Okay, then I'm going back. My next smallest number. Okay, now I see a negative 0 on the top and a negative 0 on the bottom, so I've got to move to that second digit. I see negative 0.5 on the top and negative 0.7 on the bottom. And I know since this 7 is numerically bigger, that means because it's a negative, it's the smallest one. So my next number should be negative 0.7. So when I come over here, do they both follow up with negative 0.7? And yes, they do. Then I know finally my other negative should be my next number, and they both follow up with that number as well. Okay, now I'm down to the last 2 numbers. And I just need to know which one is smaller. Well, when I come over here, it's really easy on my positives, because which one is going to be smaller, whole number 0 or whole number 1? And the answer should be that whole number 0. That whole number, 0.15. Okay, and where that one comes next is C. So there you go, my least to greatest. It's very, very important to remember that in my negatives, okay, the opposite thing happens, okay? Remember, on a negative number line, Okay, there's my positives. But over here on the negatives, the smaller it gets, the further left we go and the smaller it gets, the larger that number is going to look. Okay, so negative 100 is actually really, really small compared to negative 1, which is a much bigger negative number.